superannuation, sometimes sort of synonymously referred to as a pension, right? It's this whole idea of, hey man, you've only got this certain period of your life where you can work enough to have an income, but then thanks to the wonders of modern health and medicine, you're actually going to stay alive for a while after that, but not have continual work that will earn you money. So we want to make sure you've got something to draw on that can enable you to survive financially whilst not working, okay? So a pension is what we call that. The way that we build it is by this mechanism, superannuation. And thankfully, kind of the name itself tells you what it is. Let's go with the easy part first. Annuation. Annual. When something is annual, it is 1 year, right? Or every year, right? It's like, oh, I go on an annual business trip to somewhere, okay? So this is something that's happening, generally speaking, on a yearly basis. Hello, who are you looking for? Period for... okay, just 1 second. It warrants some explanation. Just 1 second. Where were we? We were talking about annuation. No, I knew we were talking about this topic. I just more specifically. Okay, very good. It's an annual thing, right? Usually, and then super. When you see the prefix super on something, we actually don't think about the meaning of that. Where you're like, oh, super is good, right? Boost. More specifically, thank you very much. What does it mean? Boost? This is actually not that bad a way to think about it. What does super mean? We usually think something super is good, but some words help us know it better, like a superintendent. Superintendent, it's a job. It's someone who's, it's above, right? It's something that's bigger. So like Superman is like, oh, he's bigger and better and everything like that. So this whole idea of, you have this sum of money, right? And every year it gets bigger and bigger. You add to it and you put on top every single time something which you can then draw on in the future. Right? Does that make sense? So this is like your retirement fund. You're saving, you're not taking money out of it. Hopefully, this year has been a tough year for people and their finances, so we actually have all kinds of issues with that. But this idea of superannuation is something we've entrenched in law, okay? When you get a job, your employer, in Australia anyway, is required to put money aside for you that you can't touch. It goes into your pension, into your superannuation scheme, and then it stays there until such a point as you retire, and then you can access it, or if some other kind of emergency emerges. Okay, now what does this have to do with what we've been looking at before? Well, compound interest is normally how we think about saving money, right? And we know in compound interest, your amount, we looked at yesterday, right? We have a formula for this. How do we calculate it? What comes first?
Is it a P?
It's P for principal, an amount of money you put in, then brackets. What's in the brackets? 1 plus R, so there's some interest rate, and then to the power of n. So the presumption here is you take your amount of money, put it in, and then you just wait. And it grows interest, okay? But what we're doing is we're taking that idea and extending it. What if we didn't just put a single sum of money in and let it grow interest? What if we actually did that and then next year we did it again? And then the year after that we did it again, okay? So to explore that, let's have a look at this question together. You've got these two people, both named Robin for some reason, and they are investing $10,000 in a superannuation scheme, okay? So let's start to unpack the information that's important and write it down. That $10,000 that they're investing annually, we have a name for this that I don't think is said in the question. It's called an installment. So an annual installment, in this case, is $10,000. As you can imagine, that's going to be an important piece of information for us to solve the questions that are coming. So you've got an annual installment, $10,000 goes in every single year. When does it begin? It begins on the 1st of July each year in the year 2000. Okay, so we start at the 1st of July 2000, okay? They'll often give you some information here about the date so you can know when exactly things begin. And you can see at the end in these questions, the dates matter, right? They start talking about the 30th of June and all that. We'll come to that in a minute. The money earns compound interest at 8% per annum compounded annually. So we looked at compounding periods before. This is keeping it pretty simple, just once per year. So we don't need to do any division or multiplication, that kind of thing. But we do need to write down the interest rate is 8% per annum. And because I'm so, I know of myself that I often forget when it's compounded at a different time to change those numbers, even though it's compounded annually, which is like no change, I'm still going to write that down, okay? So I'm just going to put that in brackets. Compounded, I'm really messy today, annually. Okay, happy times. Have a look at the question. Have we got all the key details? That's mostly okay, right? So now they then start to ask us, well, of this situation, what happens as we go forward in time? The first question says, how much will the fund amount to by the 30th of June 2020? 30th of June 2020. Why is the 30th of June an important date? End of financial year, right? And then when you have a look at this specific question, it also has relevance to the dates mentioned here, right? Yeah, it's a whole year. It's the 30th of June is one day before, presumably they will put in another installment. Does that make sense? If they looked at the 1st of July on that day, another $10,000 would have gone in, okay? But we're considering some $10,000 has gone in and then a whole year has elapsed, okay? Now the way that we're going to form this, and you'll see why we introduced this in the topic that we did, is to try and establish a pattern, okay? So I'm going to say let A0, you know how we've got this A here, right? And it's just an amount after some amount of time. I'm going to have several amounts for different points in time. So I'm going to call them A1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, I shouldn't say A0, I should say AN first. That's the amount after n years have passed, okay? You can see I'm sort of mentioning this because this other question that we're going to get to later asks for this expression, okay? So let's let that be the amount saved. You don't want to say the amount invested because that's the $10,000 every single year. What the amount saved, the sort of total amount after n years. We're going to use this AN notation. So now, this is what I was getting to before. Where does it all begin? A0, after no years have passed. Well, what's the first thing that begins this superannuation? Yeah, it's the first installment. $10,000 goes in, and so that's what happens. No time has actually elapsed, so no interest has been earned on this. So far, so good. Okay. So then we start to establish a pattern by thinking about what happens year by year. So now I go to the following year, A1. Okay. So this is now, if you want to put it in brackets on the side here, this is year 2001, 1 year after the first installment goes in. What happens? 12 months pass? Yep.
Put it into that formula, so it would be 10,000
Yep.
hit 1 plus 0.08 to the power of 1.
Okay, let me fill that in. Whoops. I think that's what we said, right? You've got your principal that the interest is being applied to. There's your interest, and there's how long it went for, because it's 1 year. Right? However, you can see, because we're sort of building this 1 year at a time, doing it nice and slow, I can kind of just simplify that to be that 10,000 from the previous year, and then it just got interest. Is that okay?